Hello everyone, hope that you are having a fantastic day. I am hopping on here and let me just say really quick before I get in too much that this title is a little bit of a risk and I'm taking that risk, but I want you to know that I do not believe these things and I would never say these things. So just putting that caveat out there that the title of the video and my personal thoughts and beliefs do not go together. That is not something that I really believe. So I just wanted to put that caveat out there before I get people really upset and posting a bunch of comments on here and misunderstanding what I'm trying to say. So there is that fun little caveat, and hopefully as people join in and watch this live, they will be understanding and know that I don't believe this. And really, let's raise awareness with this. And for those of you who read the title of this video and you think, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous, you will want to share this once you hear everything that I'm going to be talking about. So there's my caveat. Second caveat is that I am going to be, or not be rather, individually recognizing people when they hop on, not because I don't love you guys, but because it gets me a little distracted, and I think it distracts those who are watching as well. And there's a lot of people who watch the replay on this, so I want to make sure that they aren't like, what's going on? Just get to the point, which I'm about to do. So thanks for joining in. Thanks for sharing this video. Thanks for those of you who are catching the replay. My name is Jillian. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I provide online support and coaching for parents whose children are presenting some challenges with their behavior and their mood. And, let's be honest, what parent doesn't have challenges with their child's behavior and mood? So I help all sorts of people, including parents whose children have diagnoses of autism, ADHD, and ODD, as well as kids who don't have any diagnosis as well. But I wanted to get on here and talk about these 3 diagnoses because they are what is considered an invisible disability. And I use that word loosely just because it's got a connotation with it. And honestly, kids with autism, ADHD, and ODD, they may be, considered to have a mental health disability. However, they have incredible abilities that the rest of the population, who doesn't have a diagnosis like this, doesn't have access to. The way that these people's brains work is incredible. It's very different, and it does bring about some challenges in their life, but it also brings about some really amazing strengths and allows them to do things and think in ways and process things that a lot of us simply can't. So while it might be a mental health disability, there are also some really unique abilities that they have as well. So, why did I put these quotes on here, right? Why did I put these quotes? So this is because they're quotes that I know parents are hearing all the time, and they are flat out ridiculous. And if you are somebody who has used these sentences before, so, saying, oh, it doesn't look like your child is autism, or, that's not really a real diagnosis, you're just not being a good enough parent. If you are someone who has used these, please know I do not hate you. Please know that I am not holding bitterness or anger or anything. I just want you to know that those claims are unfounded, and it's not true or necessary for you to say those things to people. So even if you're thinking these things, even if what I'm about to share does not resonate with you, you can at least keep those thoughts to yourself, because it is rude and it hurts people, and it doesn't build them up. Like I said, if I can't convince you otherwise through this video, at least take away that by saying, oh, your kid doesn't look like they have autism, or by saying, ADHD or ODD isn't real, it's really just bad parenting, that does nothing good for anybody. It doesn't make the other parent feel good. It doesn't make them feel supported. It doesn't do anything of benefit. So if I cannot convince you otherwise, just don't say those things, please. But here is why it is an issue. And honestly, I think a lot of people who say these things just don't understand what these type of diagnoses are. And unfortunately, there are some people who have gotten these diagnoses or sought out diagnoses for their children. And, there's some kids who really don't have that diagnosis. And so there's that complication where, kids who don't really have the diagnosis are being labeled, and, this causes issues for other people whose children really do have the diagnosis. And so there's confusion as to what it really is or what it really isn't. And so that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that, this isn't something that we all just generally talk about all the time. Autism, ADHD, ODD, it doesn't just come up randomly in conversation. You might have had a psychology class at some point in your life, but you probably didn't get into specific diagnoses and what they are and the impact that they have on people's lives. So let's start with autism. Let's start here. So your child doesn't look like they have autism. Okay, let me just say first, there is no looks like they have autism. Autism is a spectrum disorder. And when we think of a spectrum, many people are familiar with the light spectrum, right? So there's a broad range, a bunch of different colors, lightness, all of that, right? So same thing with autism. There are a bunch of different variations of this diagnosis. And no two kids with an autism diagnosis are the same. None of them. They all have specific, unique backgrounds. There's obviously going to be some things that are, consistent across the board that many of them experience. But just because, maybe you've seen somebody with severe autism or low functioning autism, that doesn't mean that someone with high functioning autism is going to look, act, behave in the same way as that person with low functioning autism. However, they still both have that same diagnosis. Now, there are qualifiers, things like intellectual impairment or with no intellectual impairment. Some kids have verbalization difficulties, others don't. Some have very repetitive behaviors, some don't. Some have really difficulty with socializing and don't want to make friends at all, and some do want to make friends. They might be a little awkward about it, but they do want to make friends. So there are so many different variations of people who have autism spectrum disorder. So saying that your child doesn't look like they have autism doesn't really mean anything, because there is no autism look. There is no autism look. And so that is something that doesn't need to be said or shared. And this is especially difficult for those, with the high functioning autism, because especially if you've met somebody who maybe their child does have the low functioning autism and they're nonverbal, or maybe it wouldn't be realistic for them to get a job someday. There are plenty of people on the spectrum who are able to function in society very regularly. And I don't believe my husband would mind me sharing this, but we believe that, when he was younger, they were trying to get him a diagnosis for ADD, ADHD, and he didn't qualify. And that's because we firmly believe that he actually would have been diagnosed with Asperger's, which Asperger's has recently gone away, and they've lumped it into autism spectrum disorder. He is a wonderful husband. He is a hard worker. He has a great job, and he's an amazing man. But, he still would qualify technically for that autism diagnosis. So he's obviously very different from somebody who is more low functioning. But again, same diagnosis. So there's no looks like you have autism. That's not a thing. So that's the first one I wanted to cover. Second one is ADHD and ODD. So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit and Hyperactivity Disorder. This is different from ADD, which is attention deficit disorder, which means that there's no hyperactivity that's also involved in that diagnosis. So that's the difference between those two. And ODD is oppositional defiant disorder. So these are kids who are very strong-willed. These are kids who, you tell them to sit down and they stand up. You tell them to, go to bed and they walk downstairs. Basically you ask them to do something, they're going to do the opposite. You could even tell them to play their favorite video game and they purposely won't because you asked them to. Okay, so ADHD, ADD, ODD, these are diagnoses, again, that someone might say like, oh, well, your kid doesn't look like they have this diagnosis. Again, invisible disability. Nobody looks like they have it. But I feel like the thing that parents more so struggle with hearing from other people is that, oh, well, it's just bad parenting, or, oh, you just need to change the way that you're not doing a good enough job. You're not teaching them, you're just letting them be disobedient. You're not firm enough, etc., etc. And let me tell you, as a clinical professional, that parents do not cause ADHD or ODD in their children. They do not. They are not responsible for it. It is not poor parenting that causes ADHD or ODD. It is simply something that child is born with. We all have personality bents. Our brains all have different brain chemistry. And some people are more prone towards one thing or another. Would you blame somebody, if somebody has depression, would you say, oh, well, it's their parents' fault for bad parenting. They should have, gotten them to be happier. Of course not. Of course not. And, it's the same with ODD and ADHD. There are legitimate mental health diagnoses and struggles that certain kids deal with. And it's not because their parents didn't do enough. It's not because their parents are bad parents. It's just because that's how their brain works. And so, yes, they do have some different needs and they do need some different supports. But the fact that they have different needs and supports doesn't mean that their parents have failed them in the past to cause them to need those different supports. Hopefully all of that makes sense to you. So it is definitely not bad parenting that causes ADHD or ODD. When they are truly clinical situations where someone is diagnosed with this, it is not from bad parenting. The parent couldn't have done anything to prevent it. They can choose to do things to make their child's life better and set them up for success. But they certainly have not caused them to have this diagnosis. So these are things that I just want to get on and talk about because I know that there are so many parents whose hearts are crushed by, and not just people they don't know, but crushed by their family members, crushed by their friends, people who, are blaming them for something that's not their fault and not under their control. They feel like the world is watching them and scorning them, and that is a hard place to live in. And they're already trying to meet their child's unique needs, which are tough. They're difficult. When it comes to autism, ADHD, and ODD, there are some really tough challenges that come up. And so getting that feedback from other people that's just not true and just plain hurtful, it breaks my heart. And so my desire is for people to understand, that it's not the parent's fault. But that rather their child really does have unique needs, and their kids don't look a certain way to prove that they have a diagnosis. It's just there. And so if you have someone in your life who has a child with one of these conditions, I hope you have a little grace for them. I hope that you take them at their word and you trust them that this is truly a condition and they're doing their best to help them, and that they certainly didn't do anything to cause these conditions in their children. So I am really hoping that this video gets shared to just spread awareness. So if you resonate with any of this, please pass it along. You all have a great day, and I hope that you were encouraged and learned something new today. Thank you. Bye.